I watch people every single day beg for money, and it breaks my heart because they don't understand they're doing it all wrong. They're on their knees, pleading with the universe like children crying for candy, when what they should be doing is standing tall and commanding what's already theirs. I'm going to tell you something right now that might shock you, might even make you angry at first, but once you understand it, your whole life will change forever. You don't need to ask for wealth. You don't need to pray for it or hope for it or wish upon stars for it. What you need to do is order it, command it. Demand it like a general demands obedience from his army, because wealth isn't something outside of you that you have to convince to come your way. Wealth is already yours by divine right, and it's waiting for your command to flood into your life like a river that's been held back by a dam. Now I know what you're thinking because I've heard it 1,000 times before. You're thinking, Florence, how can I command anything when I can barely pay my rent? How can I demand wealth when my bank account is empty and my bills are piling up and everywhere I turn there's evidence that I'm broke? And that right there is exactly the problem. You're looking at the evidence instead of looking at the truth. The evidence says you're poor, but the truth says you're a child of the infinite, and everything in this universe belongs to you by divine inheritance. The evidence is temporary, but the truth is eternal. And when you learn to stand on truth instead of bowing to evidence, everything shifts. I remember a woman who came to me years ago absolutely desperate. She was about to lose her home. She had 3 children and no husband because he'd left her, and she worked herself to the bone, but nothing was coming in. She said to me, Florence, I've prayed and prayed and prayed, but God isn't listening. And I looked at her and I said, my dear, God is listening, but you're speaking the wrong language. You're begging when you should be commanding. You're seeing yourself as a beggar when you are royalty. And she looked at me like I'd lost my mind. She said, how can I command anything in this condition? And I told her the condition is the result, not the cause. Your consciousness is the cause, and if you change your consciousness, the condition must follow because that's spiritual law. So we sat down together and I taught her what I'm about to teach you right now. I taught her about the power of the word. You see, most people don't understand that their words are not just sounds that disappear into the air. Your words are creative forces. They are commands sent out into the invisible realm where everything is formed before it appears in the visible world. When you say, I can't afford this, you're not just describing your situation, you're commanding it to continue. When you say, money never comes to me, you're not stating a fact. You're giving an order to the universe to keep money away from you. Your word is your wand, and you've been using it to create exactly what you don't want. I remember a woman who came to me absolutely bewildered by her circumstances. She had a good job, worked hard, yet every month without fail, some unexpected expense would drain her savings, a car repair, a medical bill. Something always happened right when she was getting ahead. She kept saying to everyone who would listen, just when I think I'm getting somewhere, something always goes wrong. And I said to her, darling, you've just told me exactly why this keeps happening. You've created a law for yourself that the moment prosperity appears, disaster must follow. You've been so faithful in repeating this pattern that the universe has no choice but to obey your command. She looked at me as though I'd revealed a great secret. But it wasn't a secret at all. She'd been announcing it to everyone, including the invisible forces that arrange circumstances. The moment she changed her words, everything shifted. Instead of waiting for the other shoe to drop, she began to affirm, money comes to me easily and stays with me joyfully. Within 3 months, not only did she stop having those mysterious emergencies, but she received a promotion she hadn't even applied for. You see, the universe is impersonal. It doesn't judge whether your words are good for you or harmful. It simply says, yes, it is done unto you as you believe and speak. You could be decreeing poverty with the same power that could decree wealth. The mechanism works exactly the same way. Most people are running around with their wands pointed backwards, creating chaos, then wondering why life is so difficult. They're praying for prosperity while simultaneously affirming lack. They're asking for love while declaring themselves unlovable. They're seeking health while constantly discussing their symptoms and limitations. This is why I tell you with such urgency, watch your words as you would guard your most precious possession, because that's exactly what they are. Every statement you make about yourself, about money, about your possibilities, is setting a law into motion. You are not powerless. You have never been powerless. You've simply been using your power unconsciously, creating by default rather than by design. And here's what changes everything. Once you become conscious of this truth, once you understand that your words have been creating your reality all along, you can no longer pretend you didn't know. You can no longer say, "It just happened to me," with a clear conscience. Because now you know better. This is both a tremendous responsibility and a magnificent opportunity. I've watched people transform their entire existence simply by changing what they say about themselves. A woman who spent years declaring, "I never have enough money," shifted to saying, "Money flows to me easily and constantly." Within weeks, not years, unexpected checks arrived. Opportunities appeared. Debts were forgiven in ways she couldn't have orchestrated herself. Was it magic? No, it was alignment. Her words finally matched the abundant universe that was always there, always ready to pour itself into her life the moment she stopped contradicting it with her speech. You see, the universe doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, "Oh, but you're wrong about that." It simply says, "Yes, as you decree, so it is." It's the most agreeable force imaginable. Whatever you persistently claim, it works to make true. This is why I say your word is your wand. Every time you speak about yourself, your circumstances, your future, you are either building or demolishing. There is no neutral ground in the realm of words. Think of it this way. If you were planting a garden, you wouldn't spend your days planting weeds while hoping for roses, would you? Yet this is precisely what most people do with their words. They plant, "I can't," "I'm not," "It's impossible," and then wonder why their garden yields such bitter fruit. The shift begins the moment you become vigilant, not anxious, but watchfully aware of what you're speaking into existence. When you catch yourself saying something that contradicts the life you desire, you stop. You don't punish yourself. You simply rephrase. You redirect your creative power toward what you actually want to experience. And yes, at first it feels awkward. Your old patterns will resist. Your mind will offer you 1,000 reasonable arguments for why you should keep speaking lack, limitation, and fear. It will say, "But I'm just being realistic." But here's the truth that will set you free. There is nothing realistic about agreeing with limitation when you live in an unlimited universe. The moment you declare, "I can't afford this," or "I'll never have enough," or "opportunities like this don't come to people like me," you have just instructed your subconscious mind to make those words your reality. You have spoken your word, and your word is law in your own universe. I've watched this principle work in the most remarkable ways. A woman once came to me absolutely convinced she would never find meaningful work. Every conversation was peppered with, "There are no good jobs, nobody's hiring, I'm too old, I'm not qualified enough." She had built an entire fortress of words around her limitation. I said to her, "You are using the most creative power in the universe, your word, to cement yourself in lack. Every time you speak those words, you are commanding your good to stay away from you." She looked startled, as if she'd never considered her complaints as actual creative acts. Most people don't. They think words are just innocent observations, harmless venting, telling it like it is. They don't realize that every word is a brick, and you are constantly building either a prison or a palace. I gave her one instruction. For the next 30 days, you will not speak a single word about lack of opportunity. Not one. Instead, you will say only, "My right work manifests now in perfect ways." You will say it morning, noon, and night. You will say it when the fear comes. You will say it when the old thoughts arise. She resisted at first, but what if someone asks me about my job search? Shouldn't I be honest? There is a difference, I told her, between honesty and agreement with limitation. You can acknowledge where you are without declaring it permanent. When someone asks about your situation, you might say, "I'm in transition and making way for the perfect opportunity." This acknowledges the present without cementing it as your future. Language is not just descriptive, it is creative. Every word you speak is a command to the universe. I once worked with a man who was deeply in debt. Every conversation with him began the same way. "I'm broke. I'm always broke. I'll probably die broke." His words were not merely reporting his condition, they were reinforcing it, building it stronger with every repetition. I asked him to stop using that phrase for 30 days. Instead, whenever the topic of money arose, he was to say, "I am open to unexpected channels of abundance." He resisted at first. "But that's not true," he protested. "I don't have abundance." "Then you are choosing," I said, "to describe your yesterday rather than design your tomorrow." Within 3 weeks, this man received an inheritance from a distant relative he'd never met. Small, yes, but enough to clear his immediate debts. More importantly, a business opportunity appeared that he would have missed entirely had he been dwelling in his story of permanent poverty. The universe had been waiting for him to stop contradicting his good. Your words are the architects of your experience. When you say, "I always" or "I never," you are giving the subconscious mind a command to continue that pattern indefinitely. When you say, "I can't afford it," you instruct your reality to maintain that limitation. But when you say, "I am now attracting abundance," or "I give thanks for the perfect opportunity," even before it appears in form, you open the channels through which your good must flow. This is not pretending. This is pre-paving. This is the work of faith made practical. The metaphysicians understand that there is a time lag between the word and its manifestation. You plant a seed. You do not dig it up each day to see if it has sprouted. You water it with expectation and wait for the harvest. Your word is that seed planted in the invisible soil of consciousness. After you speak it with conviction, your work is to hold fast in faith while the divine intelligence brings it to pass. This is not passive waiting, this is active expectation. You go about your day with a light heart, knowing the harvest is already forming beneath the surface. I recall a woman who came to me desperate for employment. The bills were piling up, and fear had its grip on her throat. I said to her, "You must stop looking at what is and start speaking to what will be." We declared together, "Infinite Spirit, open the way for my right work, in my right place, at my right time, with my right pay." She repeated this many times each day, and I instructed her to act as if the position was already hers. Within a week, an opportunity appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Someone remembered her from years before and called with a position that matched her talents perfectly, paying more than she had dared to ask. This is the mystery. Faith is not hoping something might happen. Faith is knowing it already exists in the invisible and must appear in the visible. When you know this, really know it in your bones. There is no anxiety, no striving, no manipulation. You simply speak, believe, and watch it unfold. Many people think they have faith, but they are actually living in hope mixed with doubt. True faith is complete trust. It is the quiet certainty that makes you smile even when nothing has changed in the outer world. You hold the vision steadily before you, refusing to give power to appearances. The Bible tells us that faith is the substance of things hoped for. Substance, not the shadow, but the actual substance. Your faith gives material form to the invisible idea. Without your belief, the word remains powerless, unable to take root and grow. Consider the farmers who plant in spring. They do not see the corn, they do not see the wheat, but they act with total confidence, preparing barns and equipment for the coming harvest. They have faith born of experience. And you must develop that same assurance about the spiritual laws governing your life. Your harvest might not look like what you planted. You plant corn, you expect corn. But in the spiritual realm, you plant a changed consciousness, and the form of the harvest is often a delightful surprise. I've watched people work diligently on releasing resentment toward a difficult relative. They planted forgiveness. But their harvest wasn't a transformed relative. It was a wonderful new friendship that filled that need in their life, in a completely unexpected way. The universe has better ideas than you do. This is why attachment to specific outcomes causes so much suffering. You're trying to tell infinite intelligence exactly how to solve your problems. It's like hiring the world's greatest architect and then insisting they only use blue paint. You're limiting the very power you're trying to invoke. I say to people, know what you want, but release the how. You want financial security? Wonderful. But don't insist it must come from your current job, or from a specific person, or through one particular channel. The moment you do that, you close off the 1,000 other ways abundance is trying to reach you. A woman once came to me in tears because she desperately wanted to keep her apartment, but the building was being sold. She was fighting reality, clinging to the form. I said, Bless this situation and declare that you're now shown your right home under grace in a perfect way. 2 weeks later, she was practically dancing. The building sale had fallen through, but moreover, she'd realized she'd outgrown that space. She'd been staying out of fear. She found a better apartment, for less money, in the very neighborhood she'd dreamed of but thought she couldn't afford. The harvest exceeded the planting because she stopped strangling it with fear and specific demands. She planted the consciousness of my perfect home and let the universe select the address. Now you might be saying, but what about action? Don't I have to do something? Of course you do, darling. But there's God-directed action and there's fear-directed action, and they produce entirely different results. Fear-directed action is frantic. It's checking your bank account 17 times a day. It's sending desperate emails at midnight. It's saying yes to things that make your stomach clench because you're afraid to say no. It's exhausting, and worst of all, it's planting seeds of lack with every move you make. God-directed action, on the other hand, feels light. It feels inevitable. You're not pushing the river. You're stepping into the current that was already carrying you home. The door opens, and you walk through it without second-guessing. The phone rings, and you know in your bones it's your good before you answer. Someone mentions something seemingly random, and you recognize it as your next stepping stone. I had a man come to me once who wanted to be a writer but spent all his time in a job he despised, telling himself he'd write when he had more time. I said to him, "You're trying to harvest corn from a field where you've planted nothing but resentment and excuses." He wasn't too pleased with me at first, but here's what he did. He started writing for 30 minutes every single morning, not because it would make him famous, but because it watered the garden of his dream. He affirmed, "I am a clear channel for creative ideas. The perfect opportunities come to me in perfect timing." 3 months later, and I promise you I'm not exaggerating, an editor he'd never met stumbled across something he'd posted online and offered him freelance work. Within a year, he'd left that job he hated. That's how the law works. You plant the consciousness, you water it with action that matches your faith, and the universe handles the details you couldn't have orchestrated anyway. Now, here's where most people trip themselves up completely. They think this work happens once. They read a book, they get excited, they speak a few affirmations, and then 3 days later, when their entire life hasn't transformed, they decide it doesn't work. This isn't a lottery ticket, darling. This is a practice. This is repatterning decades of conditioning. You don't go to the gym once and expect muscles that last a lifetime, do you? Of course not. Your mind is the same way. Every single day, it wants to default back to the old grooves. Fear, doubt, limitation. Those pathways are well worn. They're comfortable, even if they're miserable. Your job is to build new pathways through repetition and vigilance. I treated my spiritual practice like brushing my teeth. Non-negotiable. Morning and evening, I would sit with my inner world and course correct. If resentment tried to sneak in, I'd catch it. If fear started whispering, I'd replace it with a statement of faith. If someone's success triggered comparison, I'd immediately bless them and affirm there's enough for everyone. This daily vigilance is what separates those who transform their lives from those who just talk about it. And let me be clear, this doesn't mean you're in some rigid, joyless discipline. It means you're awake. You're present to what you're creating with every thought, every word. You're treating your consciousness like the sacred garden it is, pulling weeds before they take over. I once knew a woman who complained constantly that she had no friends. Nobody calls me. Nobody invites me anywhere. But when you watched her, she was always criticizing people, always finding fault, always suspicious of others' motives. She was a fortress, not a friend. I said to her, "You want friends? Become friendly. The universe is a mirror, remember? You're radiating distrust and criticism, so that's exactly what's reflecting back to you." She didn't like hearing that. Most people don't. They want the external world to change first, then they'll change their attitude. But that's not how this works. You change first. You become the thing you're seeking. Then the world has no choice but to match you. Most people live their entire lives in reaction. Something happens, they react. Someone says something, they react. The economy shifts, they react. They're perpetually at the mercy of conditions, tossed about like a small boat in a storm. But you were never meant to live in reaction. You were designed to live in creation. This is what intuition truly is. It's creation in motion. It's the part of you that knows before the world tells you. It's the voice that whispers the truth before logic arrives with its evidence. Your intellect? That's your servant. It's here to carry out the orders. But most people have made their intellect the master and wonder why nothing works. You cannot reason your way into abundance. You cannot logic your way into love. These things move on a different frequency entirely. I'll tell you something that will save you years of struggle. The universe doesn't respond to your needs. It responds to your conviction. Need is lack announcing itself. Conviction is fulfillment recognizing itself. When you need something, you're broadcasting, I don't have this. I am without this. Please, someone, something, fill this void. And the universe, being the perfect mirror it is, says, yes, you're absolutely right, you don't have. And it keeps that truth intact. But conviction? Conviction says, this is already mine. This belongs to me. I'm simply moving toward the physical manifestation of what's already true in the invisible. And the universe rushes to confirm that truth. Do you see the difference? It's not semantics. It's everything. This is why I tell people, never beg, never plead, never convince. Simply claim. Claim your good the way you'd claim a package with your name on it. You don't beg the postal worker. You don't question whether you deserve it. You simply say, that's mine. And you take it. Your good has your name on it. It's been waiting for you. But you have to be the one to claim it. And the way you claim it is through the word. The spoken word. Not the word that hesitates, that bargains, that begs no. The word that knows. The word that speaks from the end, from the place where it is already done. This is where most people stumble. They speak from the problem, not from the place. Solution. They pray from the lack, not from the abundance. They affirm from the fear, not from the faith. And so their words carry no weight, they're empty shells. They echo in the void, but they don't create. But when you speak from the invisible reality, when you speak as though it is already accomplished, something shifts. The universe recognizes that frequency. It responds to authority, and you are speaking with the authority of one who knows. Jesus understood this completely. He didn't say, I hope this fig tree might possibly consider withering if it's not too much trouble. He said, no man eat fruit of thee hereafter forever. And it withered from the roots. Why? Because he spoke from the place of completion, from the place where his word and the law were one. You have that same power, but you have to use it deliberately. You have to choose your words as carefully as a surgeon chooses a scalpel, because every word is either building your good or tearing it down. There's no neutral. Your subconscious doesn't recognize sarcasm or jokes. It takes everything literally. If you keep saying, I'm so broke, guess what your subconscious is busy manifesting? More broke. This is why I tell people, guard your conversations. Don't rehearse your troubles. Don't dramatize your difficulties. Don't bond with others over shared misery. I know it's tempting. Misery loves company and all that. But every time you speak it, you're watering those weeds. You're feeding the very thing you want to eliminate. Instead, speak the word of fulfillment. Even if your bank account is screaming otherwise. Even if your body is showing symptoms. Even if every circumstance is shouting that you're a fool. You speak the truth that transcends the facts. You speak from the fourth dimension into the third. And I'm not talking about lying to yourself. I'm talking about speaking from a higher truth. There's a difference. One is denial. The other is decree. When you deny something, you're still in relationship with it. You're pushing against it. You're giving it your attention, your energy, your emotional currency. That's resistance. And what you resist persists. But when you decree asterisk, you're standing in a different universe altogether. You're not arguing with the appearance. You're not trying to convince yourself it isn't there. You're simply speaking from the place where it has already changed. Jesus didn't look at the water and say, there is no water here. He looked at the water and said, this is wine. That's the difference. He didn't deny what was. He decreed what is in the realm of truth. You see, The metaphysician who walks around saying, "There is no lack, there is no lack, there is no lack," is still thinking about lack. The words may be positive, but the consciousness is still locked in combat with the appearance. But the person who says, "My supply is endless and immediate," and then goes about their day with that settled in their heart, that person has shifted worlds. They're not fighting anymore, they've moved. This is why I never teach people to deny their bills. I teach them to bless their bills in times. No times the money is on its way. You don't pretend the bill doesn't exist, that's childish, and it doesn't work. You acknowledge it, and you speak to the spiritual law that governs supply. Infinite Spirit, this bill is paid. The supply flows to me now, easily and under grace. See the difference? You're not denying, you're not resisting, you're decreeing from a place of spiritual authority. Now, here's where people get confused. They think that because they've made a decree, they have to times make it happen asterisk. So they start scrambling, they start pushing. They start trying to figure out times, how times the universe is going to deliver. And the moment they do that, they've stepped out of faith and back into effort. They've moved from the invisible into the visible, and they've taken the reins back from God. No, beloved, when you make your decree, your work is to times rest times in it. Not with passivity, but with alert, joyful expectancy. You've planted the seed, now trust the soil. The universe is not withholding from you, it's organizing for you. Every seeming delay is divine timing, arranging circumstances in your favor. The right person must be in the right place. The perfect opportunity must mature. Your consciousness must be prepared to receive what you've asked for. I knew a woman who affirmed for the perfect position, one that would use all her talents and pay her magnificently. Weeks passed. A month. She began to doubt, but she held to her word. Then suddenly, 3 opportunities appeared at once, each better than she'd imagined. She discovered later that the first company she'd applied to was about to undergo terrible upheaval. The delay had saved her from stepping into chaos. What you call waiting, God calls preparing. What you call delay, God calls protection. Trust the timing. Even when your human mind cannot understand it. And here's something crucial. You can't skip steps with cleverness. You can't manipulate the law with tricks. I've watched people try to game the universe, speaking their affirmations while harboring doubt, visualizing abundance while secretly resenting those who have it, claiming faith while planning for failure. The subconscious knows. It always knows. You cannot fool the law of mind. If you're affirming one thing while believing another, it's the belief that manifests, not the words. This is why your inner work matters more than your outer efforts. This is why I say cleanse your consciousness first. A muddy stream cannot produce clear water. A fearful heart cannot produce confident results. When you find yourself forcing, struggling, anxiously checking for results, stop. That's your signal you've shifted from faith to fear. Return to your inner kingdom. Speak your word again, this time with relaxed confidence. Remind yourself, this or something better now, manifests for me in perfect timing. That phrase, this or something better, is your safety net. It keeps you open to the universe's superior wisdom. Sometimes what you want is a stepping stone to what you truly need. Sometimes God has a shortcut your human mind never considered. I've seen people affirm for a specific amount of money, only to receive something better, a business opportunity, an inheritance, a partnership that brought them far more than the sum they'd requested. They were wise enough not to limit the channels through which their good could come. I tell people all the time, affirm the end, not the means. Don't say, I must get this money from this person by this date through this method. Say instead, Infinite Spirit, open the way for my immediate supply. Let all that is mine by divine right now reach me, in great avalanches of abundance. You see the difference? One is you standing at the door with your hand out, the other is you standing with your arms open, wide to the universe. A woman came to me once, frantic because her rent was due and she couldn't see where the money would come from. I had her speak the words, God is my supply, and large sums of money come to me quickly, under grace, in perfect ways. She resisted at first, but Florence, she said, I don't see how it's possible. There's no one to give it to me. I told her that was exactly the problem. She was looking at her human contacts instead of at her divine source. 3 days later, a company she'd worked for 10 years prior contacted her about an accounting error. They owed her back pay she never knew existed. The check arrived the morning her rent was due. That's not coincidence, darling. That's divine timing. That's what happens when you stop trying to manipulate the visible and start trusting the invisible. Your good is already on its way. Your part is to prepare for it, claim it, and get yourself out of the way so it can reach you. Now, let me address something that trips up even the most faithful students. The difference between patience and passivity. Patience is active. It's saying your word, holding your vision, and doing the next indicated thing with joy and expectation. Passivity is sitting on your couch, waiting for manna to fall from heaven while you do nothing. Faith without works is dead, the Bible tells us, and it's true. You must take the human footsteps even as you trust the divine outcome. You are a co-creator with God, not a passive recipient. You affirm, you visualize, you speak your word, and then you move your feet in the direction of your demonstration. You accept the invitation, you make the phone call, you submit the manuscript, you show up to the appointment. This is not contradiction, this is cooperation with the divine plan. I knew a man who affirmed daily for the right business opportunity. He saw it clearly, felt it deeply, spoke his word with conviction. But he refused to attend networking events, wouldn't respond to introductions, dismissed every suggestion that came his way as not quite right. He waited for perfection to announce itself on his doorstep with a brass band. Years passed, nothing changed. He complained that the law didn't work for him, that his affirmations were powerless, that God had forgotten him. But God hadn't forgotten him, he had forgotten to participate in his own unfoldment. The universe had sent him a dozen openings, and he had slammed the door on every single one. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every day to see if it's growing. But neither do you plant it, and then abandon your garden entirely, never to water or tend it again. You trust the seed, yes, but you also show up with your watering can. You create the conditions for growth. This is the balance. Unwavering faith, coupled with willing action. You know your good is on its way, and you prepare room for it. You act as if, and in acting as if, you become the person who naturally receives such blessings. So do not mistake spiritual passivity for spiritual practice. Your inner work is essential, absolutely essential, but it must flow into outer expression. You cannot think your way to a new life. You must also live your way there, one faithful step at a time.